Hey everybody, it's Boysen Hodgson with the Mankind Project USA, and today I'm getting together to have a conversation that I know we have in a lot of our men's groups out there, but we don't often have in this kind of a format. So I'm really happy to introduce Joerg Calvis. Joerg is an MKP guy, lives in Southwest Germany, and he's the creator of something called the Open Green Heart Project. We're going to be learning more about that. Oh, wait, and what's the topic of the conversation? See, I didn't even say it. We're going to be talking about pornography today. So this is where we're going. And I'm here with Joerg, and I'm here with Gary Wilson. And Gary Wilson is the creator of a site called Your Brain on Porn. And he is an addiction specialist on pornography. So we're going to be diving into a conversation that I know a lot of us have in our smaller circles, but maybe we don't take the time to kind of connect in a broader sense around pornography. So guys, thank you for being here with me. And I'm going to start with you, Gary, as kind of coming in on the expert tip and ask, how did you end up creating the project that you created? Give us a little bit of background about how you got invested in talking about, researching, and investigating pornography.
Yeah, it's rather a strange story, but I like to start off by saying that I'm not religious. I'm actually an atheist, and I have a very liberal background. My parents were liberal atheists and on and on. And so people often wonder, well, did you get into this for moral reasons? And the answer is clearly no. I blame my wife. I spent my years, I'm retired now, as an anatomy and physiology teacher. And when I met my wife long ago, she had a website. That website had a forum. The website had nothing to do with porn. It was about sexual relationships. And over the years, I had, because of my background, investigated the neurobiology of love, bonding, orgasm, sex. And we had written many articles, and these articles were on the website. And to this day, we don't know why men with porn problems showed up in our forum, but we think it might have had something to do with the key words in those articles, like orgasm, dopamine, addiction, etc. And the men showed up perhaps in 2006 and said, hey, I think that porn is causing my erectile dysfunction. Do you know anything about it? My wife says, what are you doing here? And evidently Google, as it does, put together their comments and more guys showed up. So for the next 2 to 3 years, her forum, which was about relationships, turned into basically a locker room about guys talking about porn-induced sexual problems and how their dicks were working, their dicks weren't working, on and on. Eventually, she said, can you make a separate website? I did so in 2011 called yourbrainonporn.com, and I thought it would just be a small website with some of their recovery stories, because that's what they did. They recovered from porn-induced sexual problems and other things that were porn-induced. And I put up a couple of videos. I put up some general science, but to my amazement, that site became very popular very quickly. And then I was asked to do a TED Talk about it in 2012. That became very popular. Then finally, someone convinced me to write a book about it, which I didn't want to do. And that became very popular. So it's been this whole snowball effect of something I wanted nothing to do with, because there was this gap between what primarily men were being told about the effects of porn, internet porn specifically, on them, and either lay articles or some of the research about it. So we were trying to fill in a gap, and to this day, we're still filling in a gap. So that's the short story.
Thank you. Wow. Joerg, we're going to come back. We're going to come to your story, but I'm going to stick with Gary for just a little bit longer, if you don't mind. So, Gary, what's the problem?
The problem with
pornography.
Well, first of all, you have to separate the old pornography, which was looking at Playboy centerfolds, from today's pornography, which are free tube sites. Yes. And what's the difference? So let's just do an example of maybe a 13-year-old boy let's say me as a 13-year-old boy back in 1970, and I saw my first naked pictures, which are still burnt into my brain, and it was quite exciting. But what could I imagine back in 2013 with those naked pictures? Feeling up boobs? I didn't even need to think about that. I didn't know what boobs felt like. I just looked at them. I was completely excited, and that was all I needed. But today, the 13-year-old boy, or usually younger, 10 to 11, he wants to know about sex. So he puts it in Google, and within 1 second, he's on Pornhub or X-Hamster, and he's not looking at naked pictures. Instead, he's looking at hardcore porn. He's watching real people have so-called real sex, maybe gangbangs, maybe rape. The most popular increasing genre is incest porn. He's seeing women being gagged. So what goes on is, instead of me seeing a naked girl, and then when I masturbate over the next 3 or 4 years before I come in contact with an actual partner, I masturbate about Sally sitting next to me in algebra class. He is sitting there masturbating to 20 tabs of 3-minute clips, watching people have sex, and he's learning 2 things. He's learning, number 1, this is how people have sex. This is how I should do it. That's what we hear about in articles, but that's not the worst thing. The worst thing is he's conditioning his sexual arousal template to being a voyeur instead of a participant. If I'm masturbating to the girl next door to me in math class, I'm just thinking about her. I'm thinking about being the protagonist. He is a voyeur. He's also conditioning his sexual arousal to constantly new novelty, new porn stars, new fetishes, all sorts of things where he's controlling his arousal with his mouse, and that doesn't match real life sex. So it's 2 types of conditioning. This is how I should do it. I need to mimic it. And the second one, I need this level of stimulation and watching and fetishes to be sexually aroused. And this occurs for probably a period of 4 to 6 years before he actually has sex.
Thank you very much. And can we dive more, if you don't mind, can we go into the kind of, so patterning and brain science. So I heard anatomy, physiology. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the patterning that we are doing to our brains with this kind of reward-driven stuff with pornography?
Yeah, so if we step back a little bit and we think about, the reward system. So deep in our brain, we share a limbic system, an old brain, and it's shared with pretty much all mammals. And within it is what's called the reward system. And it's pretty much the same in all mammals, and it's driven by certain neurochemicals like dopamine. And it's there to have you survive. In other words, go for things that increase the survival of you or your genes. So food, sex, even drinking water, achievement, novelty, those type of things activate the reward system. So it's being activated. Now, this reward system can be altered through stimulation so that you can become addicted, as we know, to drugs and even to activities like gambling and otherwise. But what's occurring is it's a learning system. So the most powerful learning, the highest level of reward neurochemicals, is sexual stimulation. So when you are sitting masturbating to porn and then having an orgasm to porn, you are learning. You are learning that this is important to me. So the young man can see more hot babes or hot whatever in a 10-minute porn session than his hunter-gatherer ancestors could see in a lifetime. And so his brain is learning, oh, this is again what I need to be aroused. So it becomes ingrained. It actually rewires the brain. It changes it. And that can lead to many other things we can talk about, such as the negative effects or sexual dysfunctions. But in other words, your brain is malleable. It's constantly changing. The most powerful input that it can have is sexual input. And of course, the adolescent brain is cued, and it's in such a position to change and change rapidly and learn rapidly and store the most important memories of its entire life. And that's what's occurring while these young men use internet porn.
There's some deep background for us. So we've gone all the way into the kind of physiology of addiction and how we pattern ourselves. So now I'm going to bring Joerg into the conversation and we can kind of start to engage. So you take these adolescent boys, I would have been, right? So 12 years old, for me would have been 1983. Still the same pre-internet era. So now is a very different world. So now let's fast forward into, I'm a middle-aged guy. Joerg is younger than me, but a middle-aged guy also, you can't see. What do these men end up with socially and in their worlds when we have this kind of training and patterning? So Joerg, welcome. Come on into the conversation.
Thank you for welcoming me, Boyson. So that's really interesting because I think our problem or our state where we are today is not as difficult as for the young generation coming after us. So I can see out of my background as a former porn addict that when I was introduced to internet porn, it felt like interesting. It was just like it seduced me to watch more and more, and it was interesting. And the fun fact there is that it looks so harmless, because when I first looked internet porn and I Googled it, and it was easy, as Gary said, then I saw a lot of videos online, and some were really disgusting. So I said, I'm just looking up for, let's say, red-haired girls or brown-haired girls or lesbians, some kind of soft stuff. And and I felt really disgusted by all the other options you get, where you got grandma in there or whatever, rape going on. And I was like, oh no, that's maybe not the right side I'm looking at, but at least I got something there which kind of suits me for the moment. And before I even recognized that how deep I got in there, I consumed porn daily, sometimes more than once. And this got me really, really quick hooked up to it. And by the time even that my social surrounding, like my family, I've got a 9-year-old son today, and my partner, and everything felt really good. I've got a stable business. Everything felt good. I've got a good family background. I felt really good support. But this seduction of the sexual energy was in the first moment very welcome in my life. I was like, oh yeah, that's something nice to have. And before I had a second thought on that, a few years were passed by, and I was looking at the stuff I formerly described as disgusting. So things got harder and rougher. And the point where I kind of woke up was when I was watching a video where in that sequence, a girl was taken by a man, by an really old grandpa, and her tears while she was pleasuring him orally, he took advantage of her, let's say it this way. Tears were running down and her mascara was floating down. And I kind of said, oh, that's too hard. I didn't want to go so far. But then in the next moment, I found myself being aroused to that. So I was in a big dilemma. I kind of wanted to have that sexual energy be in my life. And on the other hand side, that didn't fit to my moral, for me as a moral man, saying, okay, that's the man I want to be, and that's the man how I want to show up. So I was in a big problem.
Right.
And from that time on, I tried to escape porn.
Right. So you start to reach into some of the emotional repercussions from pornography too, as men living our lives and in relationships with women and in relationships with other people, and that compartmentalization, that hiding, so that there becomes for me that whole part of my life which is that's in a dark room.
Yeah.
That's locked away, that's secret, that is something that I'm going to literally put into shadow, hide, repress, and deny about who I am in the world. And that has repercussions also. So for me, when pornography was a regular part of my life, there was a shame cycle that was built into that, right? So I would engage, hit that shame, spiral into shame. The shame would drive more engagement. Secrecy beget secrecy, to create that really unhealthy kind of trap. So Gary, over to you. Like, how prevalent is this problem? Like, we don't hear a whole lot of talk about it out there, but how common is it?
Yeah, so obviously the studies show that there's been a tremendous increase in porn consumption, both by males and females. Perhaps the latest study from Australia found that 100% of males 15 to 29 had used porn. So and when we talk about used porn, we're talking about video porns, we're talking about porn tube sites. So if we go back to your younger days or my younger days, I never saw a porn video until I was in my 20s.
Right.
So now kids are watching them all the time. And as Joerg mentioned, he used the word disgusting. In fact, there was one study that actually asked men about escalation, and it said that 50% of the men, and these were just men who had used porn once in the last 6 months at a minimum, 50% had escalated into stuff that was previously uninteresting or disgusting. They used that word. And so it's very common for porn users, especially the younger they start, to escalate into material that doesn't match their innate sexuality, their sexual taste in any way or form. It's just normal. And to step back a little bit, what occurs that couldn't occur before 2006, before tube sites, was the ability to masturbate with one hand and then escalate through genres, just like kicking a tab on porn tube sites, with the other hand. So while, let's say, someone's watching lesbian porn, they're going, well, that's just not doing it for me. You know, it's not as exciting as it used to be. Then they say, oh, over here, here's gang rape. Let's jump into that. And all of a sudden you see, 8 guys just filling up the holes of some poor woman, and you then ejaculate to it. And as you experience, you're like, oh my God, what did I just get excited to and ejaculate to? And afterwards you have, oh my God feeling. And that is reported over and over on these large porn recovery forums, where guys cannot believe what they've escalated to. And for some of it, it's a wake-up call. For others, it's not.
Taking a breath. Yes. And that escalation. So now to put this kind of into a cultural context, maybe a social political context as well. So what is it that normalizes out there in the culture? So can you talk?
Well, I'd like to back up, because I really didn't answer your question, and I'm sorry. You said how common is it? How
prevalent is it? Yes.
So in terms of problems, so the question often is, how many people are addicted to porn? And that's the wrong question. That assumes that porn use has binary effects. It either causes addiction or it causes no problems. And that, of course, is not true. In fact, a very famous study a couple of years ago came out of the Max Planck Institute, Germany, there you go. And it found, it looked at the brains of non-addicts, but they were porn users, and it correlated more porn use with less sexual arousal to porn and a loss of gray matter in the reward system. And a loss of gray matter means fewer connections, and it means that your reward system needs more stimulation to be aroused. So these were non-addicts. So if we step back even further, and here's how I look at its effects. So traditionally, young men under 40, the traditional erectile dysfunction rates that have been measured since 1948 have been around 2% erectile dysfunction, chronic erectile dysfunction in men under 40. And that has stayed steady in all the studies up until about 2009. Then about 10 studies came out since then, and they found that erectile dysfunction rates in men under 40 were between 14 and 37%.
Wow.
What has changed since 2009? Well, smartphones in 2008, porn tube sites in 2006. These are amazing rates. In fact, one of them found for men under 40 that 37% of the men had low sexual desire. That's unheard of. There's even a study out of Japan that found that up to 1/3 of guys ages 16 to 19 had no desire for sex. 20% of French guys back in 2008 had no interest in sex. We've seen a decline in the rate of sexual activity. Back in 1991, it was 38% for high school seniors. Now it's 30%. So we've seen a decline in sexual activity, a decline in being in a relationship for young men, and yet we've seen a tremendous increase in the rates of sexual dysfunction. I'm sorry, guys, but erectile dysfunction was just not a thing back in my days for us guys. Just wasn't a thing. So what's happening? What variable has changed that it could account for it? Well, since I did a review of the literature on it with U.S. Navy doctors, I know that the only variable that's changed in the last 20 years that could account for these rates is porn use.
And now, wow.
Yeah.
I haven't heard all of that. That startling.
It is. When people hear that, they go, no, that can't be true. When I talk to men my age in their 60s and 70s, and I talk about the young men who say, you know, I got a naked, beautiful woman in front of me and I can't even get aroused. And their eyes just glaze over like I'm speaking a foreign language. Like, what? And I said, they can't even get an erection without porn. And they're like, what? How can that be? When I was 21, the wind blew and I just couldn't even get rid of my erections. So, yeah, it's just a different world out there now.
It's a different world. And what impacts does that have? So maybe this is bringing it back into the kind of, it's a culture, right? So what is the culture that's created for men especially? We're going to talk about men especially in how they relate to women or how they relate to other or how they relate to sexuality based on this thing. So now sex has become completely, for a lot of these men, sex becomes only pornography related, right?
Well, yes. If you spend 4, 5, 6 years masturbating to porn, then that's what you expect. That's what your brain expects. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, how does that manifest? And that's a very complex issue. As we see, it can manifest as many men just not interacting. It's just easier to turn on porn and masturbate to it. It could be manifest as wanting the woman to act it out. There was a study that found, looking at young people in the UK, and nearly every couple that was interacting and having sex, the man wanted to have anal sex. And this was surprising to the researchers. And what they found is that neither the male nor the female, especially the female, enjoy this activity, but they felt that they needed to do it. Well, where did that come from? It came from porn. So I think a lot of both males and females are now being educated consciously and unconsciously by porn. And so they take these expectations into the bedroom, and it's having quite a few ramifications.
And what are some of the impacts of that education that we're getting, right? So from my own history looking at, so what is it teaching? It's teaching male dominance. It's teaching misogynist attitudes towards women, violence towards women, verbal and physical violence towards women. It's teaching that women are not worth as much as men. It teaches unhealthy imagery about men's and women's bodies. All of these things this is the social education that we're getting about sex these days, right?
Right, and it's not just females, males. There's studies coming out showing that males are having genital dysphoria, which is a fancy word for I'm dissatisfied with my junk. Right. So and I don't have a muscular body, and I can't last for 10 hours, and on and on and on.
Right. You were going to say something. Please jump in.
I want to add to that that the connection changed in relationships.
Thank you. Yes.
What I could see, not only when I had the first time, I've got a beautiful partner, and when I felt like I'm not getting aroused by her, I knew something changed in the kind of nonverbal talk we have. I look at her, she looks at me. A lot of guilt and shame was in the room. And because of her, she took it away. And I was able to open up. And suddenly I recognized that not only for me, but for a lot of other men out there, that we don't talk about sex or connecting, or we don't look in each other's eyes anymore. It is just like, get on, tell her what to do, take what you want. And then when you're over, you feel that void inside. And you're just like, I don't care about that relationship. Yeah, that's the outcome for a lot of men, that the relationship is valued by the work you put into it. So the more you engage and connect with your partner, the more your relationship will thrive. And if you don't connect anymore because you just get aroused by porn, and then you don't invest in that relationship anymore, you go into you go deep inside and you kind of isolate yourself, and I'm just going to wank later to the porn, instead of like having a talk, or it's kind of difficult at the moment with her, and I just don't know what she wants, and that's too complicated. So I'm going to get the 10 tabs with the crazy videos going later, And I think a big problem which comes out of that is the loss of connection. Means for us men that we isolate, and we even feel a bigger void inside, which needs to be filled with something. And guess what we fill it with? Even more porn. Because in the end, we want to be loved, we want to be seen, we want to connect. And now we kind of connect only with our laptop or mobile phones, smartphones, to fill that void inside.
Thank you. Yeah, that was very well said.
And I'd like to just comment is that, when I monitor these forums that have hundreds of thousands of men trying to quit porn, and I collect stories. Yeah. And over the last 10 years, one of the most common benefits is they finally connect with a partner.
Yes.
Even if they're gay or straight, connect with a partner. They say, yes. Oh, I'm looking into her eyes. For the first time in my life, I have butterflies. So here's a 22-year-old saying, yes. I have butterflies. What's that? Just like they entered into another planet. Or, my goodness, I don't even have to see her naked. She just touched my hand, and the crest of my hand just gave me goosebumps. What is that? So not only do they feel much more connection, and they start to feel love and all these feelings they haven't before, they also feel more emotions in other places. Many over and over say, this is the first time I've cried in 10 years.
Beautiful.
I cannot believe it. I'm feeling emotions. I'm feeling empathy. I can't believe I was watching this stuff. So one of the most common benefits is I feel more emotions. In other words, what they're saying is I wasn't feeling emotions prior to this.
That is very well said. Yes. So that kind of takes us into this part of the conversation. And first of all, I want to just talk about, let's just put a point on the addiction conversation. So you said, Gary, it's not a binary. This is not a black or white thing. And I've been listening to Gabor Mate's most recent book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. Are you familiar with that?
I'm familiar somewhat with his work, yes.
In this book, he starts with the brain scientist, and he worked in a clinic and that was basically a hotel for serious long-term, usually lifelong addicts. And he dives into all the brain science and reward science and all of the patterning that gets established, and has an incredible amount of empathy and compassion for the people that he's working with. And he recognizes not every person who uses cocaine becomes addicted to cocaine, but when you have this kind of continuum of early childhood trauma plus failed reward system plus non-attachment plus whatever that gets rolled in, and then add one little thing to that, then here's where we end up. So say a little bit more about the kind of porn addiction. I know there's controversy about even saying that.
Well, there's controversy, but there's not controversy with neuroscientists. The first thing to know is that the international classifications of disease 11, the WHO's classifications, has now put in compulsive sexual behavior disorder. And that covers porn addiction. In fact, the studies, the thing to know is that these manuals like the DSM or the ICD, they don't use the word addiction, they use disorder. So alcohol use disorder, gambling disorder, and now we have compulsive sexual behavior disorder. So the actual neuroscientists who do the work recognize it. It's in the ICD-11. On the front of my site, there's 45 neurological studies. All of them have found the same brain changes that occur in drug addicts, that occur in porn users or porn addicts or sex addicts. So even though there's a very vocal propaganda machine out there, the reality is quite different. Now, I'd like to address this idea that trauma or childhood issues lead to addiction. Now, that is generally accepted when you look at substance addiction, right. But there are exceptions to the rule.
Yes.
Cigarettes. Half of adult Americans were addicted to smoking. Did a half of adult Americans have childhood issues? Now, when we step away from drugs and we move to natural rewards, we can see that the brains of animals are designed to get excited, reward systems turned on by sex and yummy food. So today in America, 70% of adults are 79% are overweight and 35% are obese. Do all of those have childhood issues, or are they being faced by something they've never encountered before? The combination of fat, sugar, and salt into one entity, the endless junk food, the McDonald's everywhere. In other words, it's a supernormal stimulus, something we never evolved with. We evolved with dried venison, boiled roots, raw nuts, and you don't see fat hunter-gatherers. They don't exist. Now, today we have a supernormal stimulus of our most important stimulus, which is sex, and that is endless internet porn. And it is shaping our sexuality. So while maybe only 10 to 15% of humans who use cocaine or meth or heroin become addicted. Same thing for animals, same thing for rat studies.
Right.
It's not the same when we go to natural reinforcers like junk food or endless pornography or video games. An entire generation is sitting around playing video games. I'm not sure how many are addicted, but video game addiction is also recognized by the ICD-11. So we need to really carefully separate addictive drugs, which are often aversive. Rats often don't even like addictive drugs. Right. They even have to breed rats to even drink alcohol. And Yet, if you give rats unlimited access to junk food, they almost 100% will eat to obesity. So there's quite a bit of difference between natural reinforcers and addictive drugs. I just want to make that point.
That's exactly where I wanted you to go. That's beautiful. So supernormal, was that the term that you were using?
Yeah, so supernormal was a term that was coined by Nicholas Tinberger, who won the Nobel Prize for it. And what he did, he discovered that animals would be attracted to supernormal versions. So what he did, for example, one of his famous experiments was he went to the shore and found some birds and they sit on eggs. What he did is he took the eggs, made them with brighter blue spots than the normal eggs, made them slightly bigger, and all these female birds left their eggs that they laid, went over to the bright blue ones and sat on them. And so their chicks died. So they were attracted to certain qualities in those eggs. And of course, when we look at food, what are the qualities? Sugar and fat are not combined in nature. Now add in salt. Now add in crispy. And what do you have? I don't know. You have a dessert. You can have chips. You can have French fries. You can have a burger that has salt and sugar and fat all combined together. And these are things we never encountered. So they capture our innate reward systems and they fire them up, and it's a comparison. So it's like, okay, which would I rather have? Would I rather have French fries and a burger, or I would rather have boiled roots? Okay, my brain says the Big Mac is better, and that's because it has all these qualities that indicate high dense calories, and the high dense calories indicate a greater ability to store fat and survive. When it comes to porn, you're looking at, oh, I can not only impregnate a single woman, I can impregnate 100. My brain is just looking at 100 while I'm jerking off, right. And that's something I could never get in nature.
Right. And it's and way below prefrontal cortex level, right? So in order to deal with this, so now we're moving into the now what. So we've established prevalence, we've established the insidiousness, we've established the kind of physical addiction, we've established all of this stuff. Now what? So Joerg, talk about the Green Heart, and Gary will hear a little bit more about like the No Fat Forum or the No Fat movement, but I want to hear about resensitization. How do men who, if you're out there and you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in this, now what can I do?
Thank you. Yeah, so especially for me as a man who went through the NWTA, I see myself as an evolved man. You know, I stand up and I want to always check on my integrity. And I've got a big problem because I'm not in integrity anymore. So this happens for every man outside there in the world. They use porn and they feel like this total isolation, and they numb themselves with that porn. And it is so hard to find a way out of that, because if I isolate myself, I'm not able to talk about it. I'm not able to exchange views or get a different perspective on that. So the first thing someone should check is, how affected am I by porn use? So just watch your relationship. If you've got a partner, just watch what happens when you engage with that partner. Do you need some fantasies in your mind? Or do you often go to your laptop afterwards? So as soon as you find out that no matter if you feel addicted or if you cannot cope with that imagination and say, yeah, I just like it. You know, I just like it. There's no problem for me. So just try to stay away from it for 30 days. And you will see how big that problem is. Mm. And then you need to find a way to get out of that isolation and engage in a safe container with somebody to talk about it. So the possibility is either to find a forum where you can be anonymous. Is it right? Anonymous?
Anonymous, yes.
Anonymous, where you don't have to really show up, but it's still hiding in the end. Okay, you can read, you can get some information, but you're still hiding. That's not the man I want to be. I want to show up with the bright side and my dark sides. So what I did is I joined NoFap, which is a forum online with thousands and thousands of men and women discussing these problems. And I put my picture in it because I didn't want to hide anymore. And I found out for myself, as soon as I did this, I felt in integrity straight away. I knew I won't be blamed for it. It's my life and it was my decision, and now I can have a different perspective on it. So after quite some time, I found out I need an even safer container to open up more, because every time I felt that void, in the end I felt shame and guilt and all that. And so I needed something where I wanted to step out of that porn use and still feeling safe and held by men or a group where I can open up honestly and be vulnerable without getting finger pointed at. You're the one. You're the one watching porn, aren't you? So porn use is nothing bad. There's nothing bad about porn. That's the first thing to know. It's the way we use porn, and we change our healthy sexuality into something really we don't want to look at anymore. Mm-hmm. So my step was to develop a program, a process, which is called the Open Green Heart Project, where we built such a safe container, and we have got a process where we go through the different stages to really take out the energy we usually would have put into that porn use, and we take it out of it and put it in something life-affirming to actually be the man. We're not only getting rid of the negative effects of porn by using porn, we as well take the negative energy, which is usually just energy, but we use it for something negative in the end. We take this out and put it into something life-affirming, get into action, and become really, or be really the man you want to be.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, speaking personally, that for me, shifting where I focused my energy, and then also knowing now, today where I am, that if I start to be drawn toward pornography, if I start to be drawn toward that use, then I need to look at where other things that are going on in my life. So, I'm feeling that need to avoid intimacy or presence in my relationship. I'm feeling a need to avoid, I don't want to face the work that I have to do. And I can check my energy and say, there it is. Now I can refocus back into a different path. So let's talk about resensitization. Gary, it sounds like you've really followed for a long time these kind of evolutionary paths that men put themselves on. What does it take for a person, a man or a woman, to kind of get out of that addicted state of reward system?
Yeah, well, I think what both of you said is great, because many people need much more than just simply white knuckling.
Yes.
And even though they may try to replace porn with other activities, and they'll add in great things like meditation, exercise, very importantly, socializing, especially for these young men and women, need to get out and connect with the real world. There's many things they can do to help along the way, but often they need support. And as you mentioned, they need closer support, closer than they can get on the forums. Right. Some might even need therapy. Right. So everyone needs to be very flexible in their approach. And both of you are really describing mindfulness, just being very aware. And awareness, then you can do something about it. If you just go back into your patterned behaviors, it's very hard to be aware. The question you're asking is about the progression. And so what's interesting is, since mostly I monitor forums that are young men who've been using porn since an early age, they often deal with things that maybe older men don't deal with. One of them is many of them experience severe withdrawal symptoms, and that scares them. And the one way to get over withdrawal symptoms is go back to your addiction. A second thing that is not well known but is quite consistent is many of the chronic users will experience what we call the flat line. And the flat line, it occurs about a week or two into giving it up, and it's a severe loss of libido. It's often accompanied by depression. Some men will actually describe their genitals shrinking. Some have even described them turning sort of blue, like they're not getting enough blood. I'm not making this up. It's been reported year after year. And sometimes these flat lines, especially for the young chronic users, can last weeks to months. And it's very frightening. It's unexplained what's going on, but it does indicate a severe change in the brain. So what they need to know is that both of these can occur, and you need to go through them and get to the other side. So there are some really nasty symptoms that can occur. So I just want to put that out in addition to what you've said. As far as the brain, since the brain changes itself, and there's a great book everyone should read by Norman Doidge, The Brain That Changes Itself, and he has a whole chapter about porn, and he was one of the first to talk about it back in 2007. And since the brain can change and become addicted, it can change and not only become unaddicted, but become more aware. And it can, whereas before you need heavy stimulation of video gaming and porn just to be somewhat feeling alive, afterwards, after months, the simplest things like a sunset or eating ice cream or going to a movie with your girlfriend are just, oh, this is fulfilling. And so that's what you're looking for, is the brain to heal itself. And you don't want to think of it as damage, because it's not really damage. It's just, oh, it's gotten used to a certain level of stimulation, right, and it needs to now disengage from that stimulation and get its joy and its pain from real life. And it will change, and you will become much more joyous in your life simply by the simple things. And that will occur.
Thank you.
So that's part of the important thing. The other thing that's often talked about is cravings. So, you know, we hear about AA, and what does AA do? They say, okay, stop drinking, you know, and stop drinking forever. Well, that works for drugs, but it doesn't work for natural reinforcers. So if you're obese, you can't stop eating. If you're on the internet and you're an internet addict or a porn addict, you're going to be exposed to all sorts of sexy pictures. So this isn't the same. It's about not engaging in pursuing that. So yeah, a bunch of pop-ups came up and you saw a bunch of naked women. So what? Go ahead and do something else. The key is not to go to a porn site, start clicking, start searching, start looking, and then start masturbating to it. So there's not really a relapse as such when it comes to natural rewards. There's just going back into your addictive behavior patterns. And you want to avoid that as much as possible. Relapses, if you want to use that term, which I hate, will occur. Just get back on the horse, just go, oh, well, and just think about not that, oh, I just relapsed after 60 days. Think, oh, I had 60 days, which I didn't use porn. You know, try to reframe it more positively.
Thank you. And Joerg, I'm going to point back to what you were saying about being in a group with men. So this is something that you and I share in common. It's a stretch for me, right? It's something that I go to my men's group every time I'm at my men's group, and I check in with those guys. And it's been about learning. It's not about shaming myself. It's not about being shamed by anyone else. It's just about reporting, right? It's just, here's what it is. Here's what it means.
Exactly. Just to add on to what Gary said, the point is, it's not about relapsing. We even call it in the Open Green Heart Project, we call it reset. It is what supports these men in these groups. So what we came up with is we don't articulate. I just wanted to wank to this and this video where they showed that, and then the woman cried or whatever, and then gangbang. You don't have to open up in a way like opening up to your deepest wounds to others. It is like opening up to yourself, for yourself, to your wounds, and show yourself vulnerable with that. So all we do is we came up with that idea to send via a green heart via our smartphone to the group. And this symbolizes not some kind of shameful behavior I was about to do. It is in that moment we feel that craving coming up, or I feel that craving coming up. I send this symbol just to my group, and I will hold myself accountable not to watch porn until one man will reach out to me to guide me through that. So the first thing is, I still feel in integrity because I felt the craving. I went into action to send that green heart as a symbol. And in the same moment, there is no shame and guilt in there, because this symbol stands for support invitation. I ask another man, would you be willing to support me? That's all. And as soon as we can see this bigger frame, there is no kind of fear to open up anymore. The men start to send a symbol, and the next thing which will happen is that if a man contacts me, he will ask me a simple question. What is the primary emotion you're having at the moment? So because often in that moment, I feel like I'm angry about myself, that I get triggered again, or I feel a big sadness. And this is in the way of my healing, of confronting that porn issue with a great solution, though there is this emotion in between. And to solve this, all the man will ask me is, what is your primary emotion? And I'm going to express that emotion for a few minutes. So I go down into my cellar and I shout and I cry or whatever I do. And then I pick up the phone again and I say, I'm done. I'm really done. So how is it now? So let's see what we can do. And then we're going to focus on what was the need in that which was not met. Because every kind of porn use comes out of a need which I have inside of me. So maybe I felt lonely. For example, I often use porn when my partner was away for a few days. So I dropped back into porn use. So I felt lonely. And as soon as I can see this man is going to support me from that moment on. And he's saying, okay, how can you kind of fill that void of not being lonely anymore? What could you do? You could socialize. I could socialize. Okay, so how would that look like? And then we're going to figure out a way that I can go out, maybe into a bar and connect with a man or a woman, just to have a talk and feel connection. I'm not lying to myself anymore. I'm truthful, and I'm connecting and filling that void with which was originally needed for me. And then when I'm done, I share with the group. I call it share and shine. It is the moment I manifested it, I'm going to share it with the group, and I'm going to put myself into a bright light. And I did it. I connected with a woman, and very beautiful talk, and there were no thoughts of getting her into bed or whatever. I could feel that void, and in that moment I share this situation. My brain gets trained. Okay, there's a different kind of solution going on.
Kind of reward. Yeah.
So that's just fantastic sounding. And just to talk about some of the neurobiology, scientists are starting to look at addiction as a stress dysfunction. Yes. More and more studies are showing that it's really an altered stress system. And so when you're feeling lonely or angry or frustrated, all those activate the stress system. And what they do is they change the neurochemistry. I won't get into it, but they actually release some brain chemicals that activate the pathways, the sensitized pathways that cause cravings. So there's these pathways that are created during the addiction process that when they're activated later on, you know, like an alcoholic who's been sober for a month walks by a bar and he smells alcohol, all of a sudden he has cravings. Well, stress activates those same craving systems. Right. And what you've done now is you said, okay, I'm going to face those cravings and then I'm going to give myself an alternative reward, because that's what the reward system's looking for. And that reward is often a social reward. And you did that both through the accountability of someone actually reinforcing your frontal cortex and saying, hey, come on now, think about it. And then you go, okay, I've thought about it. What should I do? I'm lonely. I'm going to go engage with people, and now I'm going to get my reward this way. And the actually engaging with people soothes the reward system, and it actually counters the stress, and you've pretty much gone poof, and you've gotten rid of that possible relapse episode.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Gary. So I'm going to bring us to the end. So I have teenagers, and a whole lot of the other guys out there that are going to be listening to this have kids of whatever age. So Gary, do you have a couple of salient points that you would offer to the fathers of teenage boys and teenage girls in the age that we're living in?
Yeah, so for any of the males, I would tell them, and a lot of these videos are on my site under video and articles, I would have them go watch two men who make lots of videos called Gabe Deem and Noah Church. Both of them have recovered from porn-induced erectile dysfunction, and they're young men. So watching a few of those videos will help them understand that generation. You know, young men will think that this is normal because it is normal. And Gabe often says, you know, if someone told me, you know, talking about the moral aspects of it just did nothing for him. But if someone said, hey, you know, this might change your sexuality. This might make it less exciting when you're with a girl. This might end up causing ED. This might lead to, and it often does, maybe more social anxiety, maybe greater chance of depression, maybe, and studies back this up, maybe brain fog, maybe I'm not going to do as well in school, maybe I'm not going to enjoy life. Maybe if they tell me some of the negative outcomes that could occur with my porn use, then maybe I'll be cognizant of it. And then maybe along the way, I'll decide to take a month off or 2 months off and go, wow, porn use really did affect many aspects of my life, not only sexuality, but other aspects. And so I think without scaring the kids and making it shame, because you don't want shame surrounding it, just like with anything, eating junk food, there's negative aspects associated with it, and you may not notice them for a while. Right.
So I'm aware there was a vernacular use of girls in there, young women. What's your site, Gary? Where do people go to learn more about you and your work?
Yeah, so the site is yourbrainonporn.com, and it's a commercial-free site, and it has about 12,000 pages, but that should keep you busy. But it also links to many, many, many other sites and other resources. In fact, now George's resources, yes. And so that's what we're there for. We're a clearinghouse so people can go find whatever they need to help them.
Thank you very much, Gary. And Joerg, tell us where we can find the Open Green Heart Project.
So the Open Green Heart Project can be found on the website humanmankind.com. There is a blog where we talk about men's circles, about problems we have as men, and a lot of information about what the Open Green Heart Project is about. There is a PDF you can download where you can see how such a group works, how you can build your own group So you don't need me or anybody else. You will find your own people. And you can either join or build a group. You can get into contact and get further information.
Thank you very much. So I'm Boysen Hodgson with the Mankind Project USA. I've been with Joerg Calvis and Gary Wilson talking about pornography. Incredible conversation, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.